I walked into the courtroom, and the first thing I noticed wasn't the humidity or the ugly tie the court reporter was wearing or the murmuring of the gallery. It was the smell. The room smelled like fear. Thick, heavy, suffocating fear. I've been a judge in family court, and I've been doing this show long enough to know the difference between nervous sweat and the kind of terror that makes your knees knock together. Officer Petrie Hawkins Bird, as I call him, stood by his station, but his posture was different today. Usually, he's relaxed, stoic, a statue of calm. Today, his hand was hovering just inches from his belt, his eyes darting across the audience. He gave me a slight nod, the kind that says, "Watch your back, Judge." I took my seat, adjusted my robe, and looked down at the docket. Case number 409, Mr. Arthur Miller, defendant Marco the Prince Moretti. I looked up. On the plaintiff's side stood Arthur Miller. He was a man in his late 70s, wearing a cardigan that had seen better decades, clutching a handkerchief like it was a lifeline. He was shaking, visibly shaking. On the defendant's side stood Marco Moretti. Now, I've seen punks, I've seen thugs, I've seen liars who think a three-piece suit can hide a two-bit criminal record. But this kid, he was something else. He was young, maybe 22, slicked back hair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Mr. Miller's house. He wasn't standing, he was leaning against the podium like he owned the furniture, like he owned the building, like he owned me. He was chewing gum with his mouth open. Smack, smack, smack. "Officer Bird," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a diamond cutter on cheap glass. "Get that gum out of his mouth before I have him swallow it." The audience gasped. A few tough-looking guys in the back row shifted in their seats. Moretti didn't move. He just stared at me, a lazy grin spreading across his face. He slowly took the gum out, looked at it, and flicked it onto the floor of my courtroom. The room went dead silent. I didn't blink. I didn't yell. I just stared at him. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand. "Pick it up," I said, quietly. "Make me," Moretti said. "Now, let's get one thing straight. I have raised children. I have adjudicated thousands of cases. I have dealt with murderers, rapists, and the worst scum society has to offer. Do you think a spoiled brat with a famous last name scares me? Baloney." "Mr. Moretti," I said, my voice dropping an octave, "you seem to be under the impression that you are at a nightclub." "You are not. You are in my house, and in my house we don't litter." Bird took a step forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the defendant. Moretti's eyes flickered. Just for a second, the bravado cracked. He bent down, picked up the gum, and shoved it into a tissue. "Thank you," I said, turning my attention to the trembling old man. "Mr. Miller, you are suing the defendant for $5,000, claiming he destroyed your vintage 1967 Mustang. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Arthur stammered. His voice was so quiet I could barely hear him over the air conditioning. I parked it on the street in front of the bakery. I went inside to get a loaf of bread. When I came out, he was on the hood." "On the hood?" I asked. "Jumping on it," Arthur whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "Smashing the windshield with a baseball bat. My late wife, we bought that car on our honeymoon." I felt a flash of heat in my chest. I hate bullies. I hate people who prey on the weak. It's the reason I get out of bed in the morning. I turned to Moretti. He was checking his fingernails. "Mr. Moretti," I said sharply, "did you smash this man's car?" He looked up, feigning boredom. "I don't recall." "You don't recall?" I raised an eyebrow. "You don't recall taking a baseball bat to a car in broad daylight? Do you have early onset dementia, or are you just stupid?" "Watch your mouth, lady," Moretti snapped. The audience froze. Even Bird looked surprised. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Excuse me? Did you just tell me to watch my mouth?" "I said what I said," Moretti sneered, leaning in closer to the microphone. "You don't know who my father is, do you? If you did, you wouldn't be talking to me like I'm some common street rat." "I don't care if your father is the King of England or the Pope," I shot back. "You are in a court of law, and right now you look like a common street rat to me." Actually, that's an insult to rats. Rats have survival instincts. You clearly do not. My father is Antonio Moretti, he said, letting the name hang in the air like a poisonous cloud. I knew the name. Everyone knew the name. Antonio Moretti ran the biggest drug cartel on the East Coast from inside a maximum security prison. He was responsible for more bodies than the plague. I know who he is, I said, unimpressed. He's a convict. Number 78442. I believe he's currently making license plates. Is that the family business you're so proud of? Moretti's face turned red. You think you're funny? You think you're safe up there behind that wooden bench? Let me tell you something, Judge. Accidents happen. Brakes fail. Houses catch fire. People disappear. The threat was clear. It was direct. It was on the record. Most judges would have banged the gavel. They would have held him in contempt. They would have called for extra security. I am not most judges. I sat back in my chair and crossed my arms. I looked him up and down, analyzing him like a bug under a microscope. Are you threatening me? I asked, my voice calm, almost conversational. I'm just stating facts. Moretti shrugged, regaining his composure. This is a waste of my time. Dismiss the case, old lady, and maybe you get to go home to your grandkids tonight. I looked at Arthur Miller. He was terrified. He was gripping the podium so hard his knuckles were white. He looked ready to faint. He looked at me, pleading with his eyes to just let it go, to let the monster win so he could survive. That's when I knew. I wasn't just deciding a small claims case today. I was drawing a line in the sand. Mr. Miller, I said softly, look at me. He looked up. Did you see him do it? Yes, Your Honor. I saw him. He laughed. He told me it was because I parked in his spot. It's a public street. Do you have a police report? I asked. Arthur looked down. I called them. They came. But when they saw who it was, they left. They didn't write a report. They told me it was a civil matter. Of course they did. Corruption. It makes me sick. I turned back to Moretti. So you think you're untouchable because the local precinct is on your daddy's payroll? You think you can smash an old man's prized possession because you have a fragile ego and a violent streak? I think, Moretti said, his voice dropping to a hiss, that you are going to dismiss this case right now, or else. Or else what? I challenged him. Or else you'll call your daddy? Let me tell you something about or else, Mr. Moretti. Or else doesn't work on me. I eat or else for breakfast. I picked up a piece of paper from my desk. It was the only evidence Mr. Miller had managed to get, a grainy photo from a bystander's cell phone. It showed a man in a distinct, expensive suit swinging a bat at a Mustang. Is this you? I held up the photo. Could be anybody, Moretti scoffed. Nice suit, though. It's a suit identical to the one you are wearing right now, I pointed out, and the date stamp is from last Tuesday. Unless you have an evil twin who shares your bad taste in fashion, that is you. Objection, Moretti yelled. This is a kangaroo court. Overruled, I shouted back. And shut up, I'm speaking. You don't speak until I tell you to speak. You are a child, a spoiled, rotten, dangerous child who has never been told no in his life. Well, guess what? Today is your birthday because I'm giving you a big fat N.O. Moretti slammed his hand on the podium. Bang. You don't get it, do you? He pointed a finger at me. A finger at me. You rule against me, and my father puts a green light on you. You're dead. You hear me? Dead. The gallery erupted. Bird was moving now, stepping fully between Moretti and the bench. I held up a hand to stop Bird. Wait, I said. I looked Moretti dead in the eye. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I let the silence stretch out until it was painful. You just threatened a sitting judge on national television, I said, my voice icy. You think your father runs the world? Let me introduce you to the real world, Mr. Moretti. In the real world, when you threaten me, you don't get fear, you get justice. I turned to the camera, then back to him. You want to play gangster? Fine, let's play. I picked up my pen. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $5,000. Moretti's jaw dropped. He looked like I had just slapped him. And I continued, my voice rising. I am holding you in contempt of court. That's 5 days in jail. Immediate transfer. You can't do that. Moretti screamed, his face twisting into an ugly mask of rage. "You can't lock me up. I'm a Moretti." "I just did," I said. "Bird, take him into custody." But as Bird reached for his handcuffs, Moretti did something that shocked everyone. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He reached into his jacket pocket. Bird shouted, "Gun!" Panic exploded in the courtroom. People screamed. Mr. Miller ducked. But Moretti didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a phone. He held it up, displaying a live video feed. "Look at the screen, Judy," he screamed, laughing maniacally. "Look at it." I looked. My heart stopped for a fraction of a second. On the small screen, blurry but unmistakable, was a view of the parking lot outside the studio, my car, and standing next to it, two men with gasoline cans. $5,000, Moretti sneered, waving the phone. "Rule against me, and your precious Bentley goes boom, right now." The room was frozen. All eyes were on me. The brat held the detonator to my car and my dignity in his hand. He thought he had me checkmated. He thought material possessions mattered to me more than the law. He was wrong. I stood up. I felt the adrenaline, sharp and cold. "You think I care about a car?" I asked, staring him down. "I think you care about what's inside it." He grinned. My stomach dropped. I had left my dog, Scout, in the back seat with the AC running because my assistant was supposed to pick him up for the vet in 10 minutes. Moretti knew. He had done his homework. "Tick-tock, Judy," he whispered. "Dismiss the case. Apologize, or the dog is toast." This wasn't a court case anymore. This was war. And nobody declares war on Judge Judy Sheindlin and walks away in one piece. For a second, just one solitary second, the courtroom blurred. The only thing I could see was that tiny screen in Moretti's hand, the grainy image of my Bentley. The knowledge that Scout, my little white fluff ball of a terrier, was inside, probably sleeping on the leather seat, oblivious to the two thugs standing outside with accelerants. My heart hammered against my ribs like a gavel on a sounding block. Fear? Yes. But right behind the fear came the rage. Cold, white-hot, righteous fury. Moretti was grinning, that smug, entitlement-soaked grin that said, "I won. I found your weakness, old woman." He thought he had leverage. He thought he was playing chess. But he forgot one thing. I don't play games. I end them. "You're bluffing," I said. My voice rock steady, betraying nothing of the storm inside me. "Try me," Moretti sneered, his thumb hovering over the screen. I pressed send on a text, and they lighted up. Whoosh. Hot dog for lunch. Bird had his hand on his taser, his eyes locked on Moretti, waiting for my signal. But if Bird moved, Moretti's thumb moved. And if that thumb moved, Scout was gone. I had to be smarter. I had to be faster. I had to be Judy. I sat down, slowly, deliberately. I clasped my hands in front of me on the bench. "Okay," I said. The word hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Moretti blinked. "Okay, what?" "Okay, you win," I said, keeping my face completely neutral. "You made your point. I'm not going to sacrifice my dog for a $5,000 lawsuit." "You're a very smart young man, Mr. Moretti. Very thorough." The tension in the room shifted. The audience whispered, confused. Is she giving in? Is Judge Judy actually backing down? Arthur Miller looked at me, his face crumbling. "Your Honor?" he whispered, a sound of pure heartbreak. I didn't look at Arthur. I kept my eyes locked on Moretti. I needed him to feel powerful. I needed his ego to swell up so big it blocked his vision. "That's right." Moretti laughed, relaxing his posture. He lowered the phone slightly, just an inch. "I knew you were smart. Everyone has a price. Right, Judy? Even you. Everyone has something to lose." I corrected him. "Bird, stand down." Bird looked at me, his brow furrowed. "Judge?" I said, "Stand down, officer." I barked. Bard stepped back, hands raised, though his eyes were still drilling holes into Moretti. Moretti looked around the room, preening. He was soaking it up. The victory. The humiliation of the great Judge Judy. "So," he drawled, "dismiss the case with prejudice and tell this old geezer he owes me an apology for wasting my time." I'll do better than that, I said, leaning forward. I'll apologize to you myself. On the record. Moretti's eyes widened. This was more than he expected. This was the cherry on top. Go ahead. I'm listening. I'm sorry, I began, my voice soft, drawing him in. I'm sorry that your father failed you. I'm sorry that you think fear is respect. And I'm sorry, I paused. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 11:14 a.m. My assistant, Sarah, was never late. Never. I'm sorry you didn't check the timestamp on that video feed. Moretti frowned. What? The shadows, I said, pointing to the screen in his hand. Look at the shadows on the pavement in your video. They're long, stretching to the west. That's morning light, Mr. Moretti, early morning. But right now, it's almost noon. The sun is overhead. Moretti looked down at the phone, confusion clouding his face. And another thing? I continued, my voice sharpening like a blade. My assistant picked up Scout 20 minutes ago. I got the text notification on my watch right before I walked in here. The color drained from Moretti's face faster than water down a drain. He looked at the phone. He looked at me. It's a loop, I said, standing up again, my full height seeming to fill the room. You're playing a pre-recorded video. There is no one by my car. You're a liar, and not even a good one. No! Moretti stammered, tapping the screen frantically. They're there! I swear! Be wide, I shouted. The command cracked like a whip. Bird moved with the speed of a linebacker. Before Moretti could even process his lie collapsing, Bird was on him. He grabbed Moretti's wrist, twisting it until the phone clattered to the floor. Ow! Get off me! Moretti shrieked, sounding less like a mafia prince and more like a toddler in a tantrum. Bird spun him around and slammed him face first onto the defense table. Thud. The sound was immensely satisfying. You have the right to remain silent, Bird boomed. Use it, the audience erupted. Applause, cheers. Someone shouted, Get him, Judy. I banged my gavel. Bang, bang, bang. Quiet. Order. I want order in this court. The noise subsided, but the energy was electric. Moretti was pinned, handcuffed, his face pressed against the fake wood grain, panting. Get him up, I ordered. Bird hauled Moretti to his feet. His expensive suit was rumpled, his hair messed up. He looked small. You tried to blackmail a judge, I said, looking down at him with pure disdain. You threatened my life. You threatened an innocent animal, and you did it all on tape. Do you know what that means, Mr. Moretti? He didn't answer. He just glared, defeated. It means you're not going to county jail for 5 days, I said. Federal charges, extortion, terroristic threats against a judicial officer. I'm going to make a call to the district attorney personally. You're looking at 10 to 20 years. You wanted to follow in your father's footsteps? Congratulations, you're going to be cellmates. Moretti slumped. The fight was gone. The ego had popped. I turned my attention back to Arthur Miller. He was standing there, mouth agape, clutching his handkerchief. Mr. Miller, I said, my voice softening instantly. Yes, Your Honor. You came here for justice for your car. You're going to get it. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $5,000. Arthur nodded, tears streaming down his face. Thank you. But I added, I'm not done. I looked back at Moretti. Mr. Moretti, since you have such ample resources that you can hire goons to watch parking lots, I'm assuming you have assets. I am awarding punitive damages for emotional distress to Mr. Miller, but this is small claims. I'm capped at $5,000. However, I smiled, a real, genuine smile. The tape of you admitting to the vandalism, the threats, that's all evidence now. Mr. Miller, take that tape to civil court. Sue him for everything he's worth. Get a real lawyer. Get a shark. Take his suit. Take his watch. Take his trust fund. Arthur straightened up. He looked taller. He looked dignified. I will, Judge. I promise. Good, I said. Bird began to drag Moretti toward the exit. Wait, Moretti grunted, twisting his head back. My father, Your father, I interrupted, can't help you where you're going. And tell him something from me if you see him. Moretti waited. Tell him Judge Judy says hello. And tell him I drive a hard bargain." Bird shoved him through the doors. The heavy doors swung shut, sealing away the toxicity. The room was quiet again, but it was a good quiet. The smell of fear was gone. I looked down at my docket. I took a deep breath. "Next case," I said. The bailiff announced the next parties. A dispute over unpaid loan between ex-lovers. Routine, mundane, boring. Exactly what I needed. But just as the new plaintiff was walking in a woman with too much hairspray and a victim complex, the side door of the courtroom burst open. It wasn't a litigant. It was my producer, Randy. He never comes into the courtroom while I'm filming. Never. His face was pale. He was holding a tablet. "Judge," he said, his voice trembling, "stop tape. We have a problem." I frowned. "I'm in the middle of a session, Randy. Unless the building is on fire, get out." "It's not the building," Randy said, rushing up to the bench, ignoring protocol. He shoved the tablet toward me. "It's the news. Breaking news. Right now." I looked at the screen. Breaking news. Riots at state penitentiary. Hostage situation. And below that, a chyron scrolling in red. Cartel leader Antonio Moretti escapes custody. My blood ran cold. I looked at the door where Marco Moretti had just exited. The boy who had threatened me. The boy whose father had just broken out of prison. Randy looked at me, eyes wide. "Security says there's a black SUV blocking the exit to the lot. Armed men. They're demanding we release Marco." I stood up. The gallery was murmuring again, sensing something was wrong. "Lock the doors," I said to Bird. "Judge?" Bird asked, hand going to his weapon. "Lock the doors," I yelled. "Nobody leaves. We are in lockdown." The siren started then. Faint at first, then louder. Closer. I looked at the camera, the red light still blinking. So the little punk wasn't bluffing about his father's reach. He just got the timing wrong. The or else wasn't the car. The or else was an army. I grabbed my gavel. I didn't bang it. I held it like a weapon. "All right," I muttered to myself, my eyes narrowing. "You want a piece of me, Antonio? Come and get it." But then the lights went out. Total darkness. Screams from the audience, the sound of confusion. And in the dark, a voice came over the studio PA system. It wasn't the announcer. It wasn't Randy. It was a deep, raspy voice, heavy accent. "Judith." The voice echoed in the pitch-black room. "You have my son. I have your courtroom." A red emergency light flickered on, casting long, bloody shadows across the room. I stood there in the crimson gloom, my mind racing. I was trapped. My audience was trapped. And the most dangerous man on the East Coast was outside or maybe inside my building. I am a judge. I interpret the law. I don't carry a gun. I don't fight cartels. But I'll be damned if I let them take my courtroom. "Bird," I whispered in the darkness. "I'm here, Judge." His voice came from right beside me. "Solid, dependable. Where is Marco?" "Holding cell, back corridor, secure." "Keep him there," I said. "He is our only bargaining chip." "Judge," Bird said, his voice low, "we are unarmed against automatic weapons. If they breach, they won't breach," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "The police are coming." "Police are busy, Judith," the voice on the PA taunted as if he could hear us. "Diversion across town. Chemical spill. Very messy. No one is coming for you for at least 20 minutes. That is plenty of time. 20 minutes. An eternity." I felt a hand on my arm. It was Arthur Miller. The old man had crawled under the desks to get to the bench. "Judge," he whispered, shaking, Is this because of me?" I looked at him in the red light. A terrified old man who just wanted to buy bread. "No, Arthur," I said firmly. "This is because bad men think they can do whatever they want, and they picked the wrong day. I needed a plan. I needed to stall. I needed to control the narrative, just like I do every day." I looked up at the darkened control booth window. "Antonio," I shouted into the dark, projecting my voice like I was scolding a deadbeat dad. Silence. Then a chuckle over the speakers. "I am listening." You want your son, I yelled. Come in here and make your case, or are you too cowardly to face a woman in a robe? It was a bait, a dangerous, stupid bait. But ego runs in the family. If Marco was arrogant, his father had to be a narcissist of the highest order. Make my case? The voice laughed. I like that. A trial for Marco's freedom? Why not? I challenged. You think you're right? Prove it. Man to man or man to judge. Come in here alone. We talk. If you convince me your son deserves to walk, he walks. If not, well, you can try to kill us all, but Bird will snap Marco's neck before you get through that door. Bird looked at me, shocked. I squeezed his arm. Play along. There was a long silence. The static of the speakers hummed. Open the front doors, Antonio said. I am coming in. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He took the bait. Bird, I said, open the doors, but stay by Marco. The heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom creaked open. Silhouetted against the emergency lights of the hallway stood a figure, tall, broad, wearing an orange jumpsuit, but walking like he was in a tuxedo. Antonio Moretti walked into my courtroom, unarmed, alone. He walked right down the center aisle, past the terrified audience members huddling in the pews. He stopped at the defense podium, the same place his son had stood 10 minutes ago. He looked up at me. His face was scarred, his eyes dead and cold. Court is in session, Judith, he said. I sat down. I adjusted my collar. State your name for the record, I said. He smiled. A sharp smile. Antonio Moretti, plaintiff. And who are you suing? I asked. I am suing you, he said softly, for my son's life. I leaned forward. Then let's proceed, I said. But be warned, Mr. Moretti. In this room, justice is blind, and she doesn't like interruptions. The emergency lights bathed the courtroom in a sinister red glow. Shadows stretched long and distorted across the walls. The gallery was dead silent, save for the muffled sobs of a woman in the back row. Antonio Moretti stood at the defense podium, relaxed, his orange jumpsuit stark against the dark wood. He looked less like an escaped convict and more like a CEO at a board meeting. That was the danger of men like him. They wore chaos like a tailored suit. You're suing me for your son's life, I repeated, my voice echoing slightly in the tense silence. That's a novel cause of action. Tell me, Mr. Moretti, on what grounds? Unlawful imprisonment, he said smoothly. Kidnapping. Abuse of power. I scoffed. A loud, sharp sound. Kidnapping? I held him in contempt. He threatened an officer of the court. He threatened me. That's not kidnapping, that's consequences. A concept I'm sure is foreign to your family. Moretti stepped out from behind the podium. He began to pace, slowly, methodically, like a predator circling a watering hole. Consequences, he mused. You talk about the law like it's physics, gravity, action and reaction. But the law is just words on paper, Judith. It's a story we tell ourselves to sleep at night, to pretend the wolves aren't at the door. He stopped and looked at the audience. But the wolves are at the door. My men are outside. They have enough C4 to turn this studio into a crater. The only thing stopping them is my word. That is power, Judge. Not your gavel, not your robe, me. He turned back to me, his eyes hard. Release Marco. Now. And I walk away, no one dies. And if I don't, I asked, keeping my tone conversational, then the physics of the real world take over? Boom. I looked at him, really looked at him. He was enjoying this, the theatrics, the control. He wasn't just here for his son. He was here to break me, to prove that his brand of violence was superior to my brand of order. You're a compelling speaker, Mr. Moretti, I said, but your argument has a flaw. Oh? And what is that? You assume I care about my own survival more than my duty. Moretti laughed. Everyone wants to live, Judith. Don't be a martyr. It's bad for ratings. I'm not a martyr, I snapped. I'm a grandmother. I have a contract, and I have a lunch reservation at 1 p.m. that I intend to keep, but more importantly, I have a job to do. You think because you have guns you can dictate the verdict? That's not how this works. I stood up. You walked into my courtroom. You agreed to my terms. You want a trial, you get a trial. Bird. Bird's voice came from the shadows near the holding cell. Yes, Judge. Bring out the defendant. Moretti's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? I'm bringing out Marco. You want him? Let's see if he wants you. The door to the holding cell opened. Bird emerged, dragging a handcuffed Marco Moretti. The boy looked a mess, sweaty, pale, his arrogance completely evaporated. When he saw his father, his eyes went wide. Dad? Marco croaked. Antonio looked at his son. There was no warmth in his eyes, only assessment, disappointment. Look at you, Antonio spat, crying like a baby, letting a woman and a rent-a-cop tie you up. Dad, they have. Shut up, Antonio roared. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Marco flinched as if struck. I watched the dynamic, the fear. It wasn't just respect Marco had for his father. It was terror. Mr. Moretti, I interjected, you're not here to give parenting advice. You're here to argue for his release. So far, all you've done is insult him. He is weak, Antonio growled, but he is blood, and blood belongs with blood. Is that so? I asked. I picked up a file from my desk. It was a prop file, just blank paper, but Antonio didn't know that. Because according to Marco's earlier testimony, before the cameras cut, he was very eager to trade information on your operation for a reduced sentence. It was a lie. A bold-faced, dangerous lie. The air in the room grew instantly colder. Antonio turned his head slowly to look at Marco. Is that true? No, Marco screamed, panic rising in his voice. No, Dad, she's lying. I never said anything, I swear. He was quite specific, I continued, improvising rapidly. Something about a warehouse in New Jersey, shipment coming in on the 15th. I saw a flicker in Antonio's eyes. Recognition. I had guessed lucky. Or maybe all drug lords have warehouses in Jersey. Either way, it hit a nerve. You rat, Antonio whispered. He took a step toward Marco. Dad, no, please, it's a trick. Marco was sobbing now, trying to hide behind Bird. Stop, I ordered. Mr. Moretti, step back. You touch him and the deal is off. Antonio stopped. He was breathing heavily, his fists clenched. He looked from me to Marco. The calculation in his eyes was terrifying. He was weighing his son's life against his business. You are trying to turn us against each other, Antonio said, his voice low and dangerous. Divide and conquer. Classic judicial strategy. I deal in the truth, I said. And the truth is, your son is a liability to you. You know it, I know it. If he walks out of here with you, how long until he makes a mistake? How long until he gets caught again and really starts talking? Maybe he already has. Antonio stared at Marco. The silence stretched. You're right, Antonio said finally. Marco looked relieved. Dad, you are a liability, Antonio said. He reached into his jumpsuit. Bird shouted, down. But Antonio didn't pull a gun. He pulled a radio, a walkie-talkie. Burn it down, he said into the radio. My heart stopped. No, I screamed. But nothing happened. No explosion, no fire, no shattering glass. Just static on the radio. Antonio frowned. He clicked the button again. I said, burn it down. Execute Order 66. Still nothing. Then a voice crackled over the walkie-talkie, but it wasn't one of his men. It was a calm, distinctly American voice. This is SWAT Commander Reynolds. We have the perimeter secured. Your men are in custody. Surrender immediately. Antonio froze. He looked at the radio in his hand like it was a poisonous snake. I let out a breath that felt like it had been held for a year. The 20 minutes, the diversion, the stalling. It worked. The police weren't 20 minutes away. They were already here. I looked at Antonio Moretti, the king of the East Coast. The man who scared everyone. He looked small. Well, Mr. Moretti, I said, a small smile playing on my lips. It seems your wolves have been taken to the pound. Antonio looked around wildly. He realized he was trapped, alone, unarmed, in a room with Bird. He looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, Judith. I will find you. From inside, from outside, I will. Oh, shut up, I yelled. I was done. I was tired, and I was hungry. Bird! I pointed at Antonio. Arrest him. Bird moved forward, handcuffs ready. Antonio tensed, ready to fight. But then he looked at Marco. Marco, who was still cowering behind Bird. Marco, Antonio said, help me, attack him, now. Marco looked at his father. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at Bird, who was twice his size. Marco did nothing. Antonio sneered. Useless. Bird grabbed Antonio. He spun him around and slammed him against the podium. Clack, clack. The handcuffs went on. The lights in the courtroom flickered and then buzzed back on. Full, bright, harsh studio lighting. The red gloom vanished. The audience, realizing they were safe, let out a collective gasp, followed by hesitant applause that quickly grew into a roar. I sat back in my chair. My hands were shaking slightly, just a little. I clasped them together so no one would see. Order! I banged the gavel. Order in the court! The applause died down, but the energy was still manic. I looked at the two Morettis, father and son, both in cuffs, both defeated. Officer Bird, I said, please escort the defendants to the awaiting SWAT team and make sure to tell the commander that I expect the parking lot cleared immediately. I have a lunch date. Yes, Judge, Bird said, a wide grin on his face. He hauled them both toward the door. As they reached the exit, Antonio turned back one last time. You got lucky, Judge. Luck has nothing to do with it, I said. It's about being smarter than the other guy. And today, Mr. Moretti, I was smarter. Get them out of here. The doors closed. They were gone. I looked at Arthur Miller. He was still standing there, looking like he'd just survived the Titanic. Mr. Miller, I said. Yes, Judge? You okay? I think so. Did that just happen? It did, I said. And you're going to have a hell of a story to tell at bingo. I picked up my pen. I looked at the camera. We're done here, I said. I stood up and walked out, backstage. I walked into my chambers and closed the door. I leaned against it for a moment, closing my eyes. Breathe, Judy. Breathe. I walked over to the couch. There, sitting perfectly safe and sound, was Scout. He wagged his tail when he saw me. Hello, Bubby, I cooed, picking him up and burying my face in his fur. Did you miss me? My assistant, Sarah, rushed in. Judge, oh my God, are you okay? The news is going crazy. They're saying you took down a cartel leader. I didn't take down anyone, Sarah, I said, putting Scout down and straightening my robe. I just presided over my courtroom. Did you make the reservation at the Ivy? Yes, but Judge, the press is outside. Hundreds of them. They want a statement. I sighed. I walked over to the mirror and fixed my hair. I reapplied my lipstick. Fine, I said. I'll give them a statement. I walked out of my chambers, down the hall, and pushed open the heavy double doors to the outside world. Flashes exploded. Microphones were shoved in my face. Reporters were shouting over each other. Judge Judy! Judge Judy, how did you stay so calm? Were you scared? What did you say to Antonio Moretti? I held up a hand. The crowd went silent. I looked into the bank of cameras. I have one thing to say. I announced, my voice clear and sharp. If you break the law, you pay the price. It doesn't matter if you're a nobody or a kingpin. In my courtroom, everybody is equal, and everybody answers to me. I paused for effect. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to lunch and get that microphone out of my face before I find you in contempt. I pushed through the crowd, head held high, marching toward my Bentley. It was still there, shiny, undamaged. I got in. I started the engine. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The chaos was shrinking behind me. Just another day at the office. Epilogue. 6 months later, I was sitting in my living room, reading the paper. Headline, Moretti crime family dismantled. Father and son sentenced to life. I smiled. Justice is sweet. My phone rang. It was the network executive. Judy, he said, sounding breathless. The ratings for the hostage episode, they're astronomical. Biggest numbers in daytime history. We want to renew. 5 more years. Double the salary. I took a sip of my tea. Double isn't enough, I said. Triple? He offered immediately. We'll talk, I said. But first, I have a condition. Name it. I want a new bailiff station for Bird. The old one is squeaky, and I want better snacks in the green room. Those pretzels were stale. Done and done, he said. I hung up. I looked down at Scout, who was sleeping at my feet. You hear that, Scout? I whispered. We're getting better snacks. He snored. I turned the page of the newspaper.